unleashed his trusted attorney general against career law enforcement and intelligence officials Trump sees as his enemies. The White House announced last night that Attorney General Bill Barr has been given free rein to investigate the law enforcement officials and intelligence officials who began the Russia investigation and to unilaterally declassify any intelligence helpful to Trump that he might find. We know the president has long championed the narrative that the investigation into his campaign's interactions with Russia was illegitimate from the jump.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings of that investigation. You look at the origin of the investigation, where it started, how it started, who started it, whether it's McCabe or Comey or a lot of them. The Mueller report, I wish, covered the oranges, how it started, the beginnings of the investigation, how it started.
Barr can now squeeze that orange. Trump has every reason to believe Barr will use his new powers to aid the president's anti-deep state propaganda efforts. The Associated Press reports Trump has told close confidence that he finally had my attorney general. Now, Barr has been criticized from across the political spectrum as a lackey in a position where independent power is of the utmost importance. And Trump giving Barr unilateral authority over classification is just a huge deal in the world of intelligence agencies. Barr will be able to override other agencies' independent classification determinations. And the goal of all this here seems pretty clear. It's basically to give Sean Hannity material for his television show. Selective declassification has already been used here by Congressman Devin Nunes when he was chair of the House Intelligence Committee. You might remember the Nunes memo about supposed anti-Trump bias in the Russia investigation, or maybe you don't. There wasn't much to it in the end. But another example of how the selective release of information can work is in none other than Bill Barr's own piecemeal release of the Mueller report. For example, Barr quoted part 1 of a sentence making it seem that Mueller found Trump's campaign had nothing to do with Russia. Weeks later, when we saw the complete sentence, it became clear this couldn't have been further from the truth. Now, all of this comes in the context of the president claiming that the guy who used to run the FBI is guilty of treason, a crime punishable by death.
Sir, the Constitution says treason is punishable by death. You've accused your adversaries of treason. Who specifically are you accusing of treason?
Well, I think a number of people, and I think what you look is that they have unsuccessfully tried to take down the wrong person. If you look at Comey, if you look at McCabe, if you look at probably people higher than that, if you look at Strzok, they want an insurance policy so that should she for any reason lose, remember, 100 million to 1. Maybe he said 100 million to nothing. But should she lose, we'll have an insurance policy and we'll get this guy out of office. And that's what they said, and that's what they meant. That's treason.
Just to be clear what you just saw there, one of our own reporters raised to the president that treason carries the death penalty. That is to say, someone can be executed, killed for that crime, and asked him specifically who he's talking about. And he just names a bunch of people, including the former FBI director. So the plan, as it appears now, is essentially a kind of purge of the ideologically suspect members of the intelligence apparatus. That is a sentence that, uttered in any other context about another society or country, would be deeply terrifying and raise serious concerns about the rule of law. Joining me now, a man with a deep understanding about the importance of classification. John Brennan served as director of the CIA under President Obama. He's now an NBC News senior national security and intelligence analyst. How big a deal do you read the portion of the executive order last night that appears to give Barr the unilateral authority to declassify?
Well, I see it as a very, very serious and outrageous move on the part of Mr. Trump, once again, trampling upon the statutory authorities of the Director of National Intelligence and the heads of the independent intelligence agencies. And it's unclear to me what Mr. Barr actually is going to do. Is he investigating a crime? Well, what's the predication of that crime? Or is he just going to be looking for information? I think, as you rightly pointed out at the top, that Mr. Trump can just give to some of his defenders on the right. and cherry pick information that could be taken out of context. But I think more fundamentally, the concern is that very, very precious and sensitive sources and methods of the United States intelligence community, as well as our partners and allies abroad, those who share this sensitive information with us. Is Mr. Barr, who doesn't have an understanding of the equities involved, is he just going to release information that he deems appropriate for Mr. Trump's defense? So this is very serious, and I know that my former colleagues in the intelligence agencies are looking upon this with great concern and worry.
It's interesting you said that, because sometimes the president will issue an executive order that ends up being more a messaging document than actually conferring power. This one seemed to me, upon reading, to confer some power. You appear to see it the same way, and I want to read the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates' statement, and get your reaction to it. He says, much like we have with other investigations and reviews, the intelligence community will provide the DOJ all the appropriate information for its review of intelligence activities related to Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. As part of that process, I am confident the Attorney General will work with the intelligence community in accordance with long-established standards to protect highly sensitive classified information that, if publicly released, would put our national security at risk. What do you think of that statement?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Dan Coates. I think he is trying to protect the men and women of the intelligence community. And what he says in there is that they will provide, the intelligence community will provide the appropriate information. And I think that's critically important. What is that appropriate information? What is the basis for those requests? But I do hope that Dan Coates and Gina Haspel stand up to this effort by Mr. Trump, which really does seem to go into the sensitive files, the very sensitive, whether it be technical or human source files, and to pull out of that information that they may see fit as to defend Mr. Trump. So I implore Dan Coates, Gina Haspel, and others to stand up to this, I think, unprecedented act on the part of Mr. Trump, who doesn't understand nor care about the national security concerns of the intelligence community.
I want to read you a section from a column in the New York Times today about you and and Russian intelligence, and ask if this is sort of an area of concern for you. This is about John Brennan, yourself, the CIA director, and Mr. Obama would bring reports from the source. This is about a source inside the Russian government directly to the White House, keeping them out of the president's daily intelligence briefing for fear the briefing document was too widely disseminated. Instead, he would place them in an envelope for Mr. Obama and a tiny circle of aides to read. The source provided evidence for one of the last major intelligence conclusions Mr. Obama made before leaving office, and Mr. Putin himself was behind the Russia hack. Are you worried about the exposure of sources that are giving us intel on Russia?
Well, I'm not going to get into any of the specifics,
of course,
as you can imagine, but I am deeply, deeply concerned about what is going on right now and how Mr. Trump is authorizing what appears to be his personal attorney to pursue these efforts inside of the intelligence community agencies and to uncover and to potentially release this information that could, in fact, put people's lives in great jeopardy, as well as put very sensitive and very exquisite U.S. intelligence capabilities at risk. This is something that I think that the intelligence committees of jurisdiction, the Senate Intelligence and the House Intelligence Committees, really need to exert their appropriate authorities and to stop any reckless and irresponsible release of information that could harm this country for years to come.
What do you say to folks that say the intelligence community is capable of wielding classification and secrecy like a sword to protect its turf, to keep committees of oversight away from them, to fight intramural battles for supremacy within the government, and maybe it's good to give someone the power to kind of get in there and override that?
Well, the women and men of the intelligence communities do their utmost to keep their fellow citizens safe and secure. And they do their utmost to keep these intelligence collection capabilities, whether they be technical or whether they be human sources, safe from harm. And so to say that someone else should come in here and just release things almost willy-nilly, I think is a reckless initiative. And so I do believe that the intelligence committees in the Congress are the appropriate ones to make sure that the intelligence community is carrying out its responsibilities faithfully and in accordance with the law, as opposed to somebody coming in who clearly, again, has a political agenda.
Final question for you here about the effect of all this. I mean, here you've got folks who started a very secret counterintelligence investigation in the midst of the 2016 campaign, a counterintelligence investigation that, had it leaked, would have been explosive politically and did not leak. They kept it completely secret during that period of time. What will it do to folks who work in counterintelligence or who work on these issues in the back of their head that if they pursue them, they may find themselves on the wrong end of an internal investigation?
Well, I hope they stay strong, but I think the attempt here is to try to intimidate those who might go against Mr. Trump and the members of his administration. I think it's critically important that the counterintelligence professionals continue to carry out their responsibilities and resist these unwarranted and very, very irresponsible efforts to try to undermine what they're doing. And also, I am very concerned about those human sources around the globe who put their lives at risk for this country. And they're watching this spectacle in Washington right now. And they're watching Mr. Trump potentially expose all this information to try to keep him safe from the appropriate investigations that are underway. I really am concerned that this is going to harm our national security in a manner that we have not seen before.
All right, John Brennan, thank you very much for sharing your time and expertise this evening.
Thank you, Chris.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.